The Never Say Die boys did it again. No lead is too big enough for this team to come from behind. This time against the defending two-time Stanley Cup champions. A debut for a prospect who played and looks like he belongs. An update again on Carey Price. And an impressive win dedicated to two people in particular. The Canadiens 5, the Lightning 4. Brunchin with Marinaro coming up with Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette and HockeyInsideOut.com.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
And now a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Sports entertainment like no other. Brought to you by 8.6 Beer. Intense by nature.
And good morning and welcome on this Sunday morning. It is April 3rd. I'm Marinaro. It is the Sick Podcast. Brunchin with Marinaro today, along with Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette and HockeyInsideOut.com. Stu, good Sunday morning.
Hey, Tony, how are you?
Very, very good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Not as good as my friend and colleague Pat Hickey, who was in Tampa for the game last night and got to watch it firsthand.
You know what? Let me ask you something. Does Pat get first dibs on choosing the games? Because I think he's got maybe a little bit more seniority.
Exactly. He's got just a little bit more seniority than I do.
All right.
I'm going to New Jersey this week, so we're back traveling with the Canadiens again at the Gazette.
All right. Okay. So Pat's got a little bit more seniority, so he chooses the trips, and he chose Tampa, and he gave you Jersey.
Well, I've actually been on vacation this week too, but Pat did Carolina and New Jersey, and then I've got Carolina and Tampa. I've got New Jersey, and then Columbus, which Columbus is one of the NHL cities I really like. Actually, it's a beautiful little place.
Stu, I've seen some of your pictures from Tampa before on Facebook because we're friends on Facebook, and it looks like you enjoy it there.
It's beautiful. I mean, life as a Tampa Bay Lightning player must be very, very, very sweet. Apart from the fact they're an outstanding hockey team. The area, the Riverwalk area around Tampa, where the arena is absolutely gorgeous, and I think it's Fisher Island that the guys live on. It's an island.
Oh yeah.
It's life as a Tampa Bay Lightning must be very, very sweet.
And it was very sweet for the Montreal Canadiens last night for a couple of guys, in particular, actually for the entire team. Stu, a buddy of mine called me last night when the game was tied at 4. Now the Canadiens were down 3-1 in this hockey game. And they're able to come back and make it 3-3, and then they're down 4-3, and they tie it at 4. And my buddy calls me, and he says, Tony, since Marty St. Louis took over, this has to be the most exciting, worst-placed team in the standings ever, or give or take. I mean, they're there along with Arizona and Seattle as the worst teams in the National Hockey League. Statistically, their positions have changed over the last 3 weeks or so, up, down, but they're there. And you know what, Stu? You think about it, and he's right. I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, man, I think this is one of the last month and a half has probably been the most fun I've had watching their games, more so than years when they went to the playoffs and won a round or two.
Yeah, I mean, the fact they're still at the bottom of the standings, Tony, just shows you how bad they were before Marty St. Louis took over, because I haven't looked at they're a little bit above 500, right around 500 since St. Louis took over. And as you said, they're never out of any game. They're fun. They're exciting to watch. He's playing the young kids, letting them get experience. We saw Jordan Harris on the ice in overtime last night, Barron on the ice again in overtime. The players are having fun, and they're a lot of fun to watch. And this is a team that you don't turn off the channel anymore. You don't change the channel when they're down by a goal or two, because it's never over. Even when they're playing against Tampa, the best team in the NHL the last 2 years, they don't give up. And just look at the celebration they had after the game last night on the ice. Yeah, I mean, for a lot, this is no longer doesn't matter where they are in the standings right now. This is no longer the worst team in the NHL.
You know, you're right about that. It really was. It was a big night for Jordan Harris, right? Who was drafted back in 2018 in the third round. By the way, not a bad draft year, right? Trevor Timmins took more than his share of abuse over the years that he was with the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, his first draft year with the Canadiens was 2003, which went on to be probably the deepest draft in the history of the National Hockey League. And he drafted Andrei Kostitsyn with the 10th pick overall. And, Trevor had some good drafts. He had some not so good drafts, but he was the subject of quite a bit of criticism. Now, if 2018's first round pick, third overall, Jesperi Kotkaniemi is still being questioned in Montreal. And of course, a lot of people take a look at Quinn Hughes. A lot of people take a look at Brady Tkachuk. But the other picks, the rest of the draft, Alexander Romanov, Jesse Ylonen, and
Tony,
Jordan Harris.
Tony, I don't know if you can hear me there. I can't hear you right now. Something happened. I've lost your mic.
Okay. Listen, I can hear you. And if you want, what we can do is we can disconnect. And, well, he can't hear me. So I think we should disconnect Stu, and then we'll try and bring him back up again. Okay, so why don't we do that? No problem at all. These things happen sometimes, especially when you're live. But don't worry about it. You got a seasoned veteran who's going to take control. All right, okay. I'm going to give you a quick recap on the game and tell you, by the way, what the show is all about. It's Brunchin with Marinaro. We do it live on Sundays more often than not with Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette and HockeyInsideOut.com. And, of course, brought to you by 8.6 Beer, intense by nature, the beer for those who follow their instinct and live their passions in order to make their mark. I'll also tell you that we are live right now on Facebook at The Sick Podcast. We're live right now on Twitter at The Sick Podcast and live right now on YouTube at The Sick Podcast. By the way, on YouTube, subscribe. It's absolutely free to follow our channel. And on all the social media channels, as well as Instagram, you can be notified when we upload something. You can be notified when we go live. So that's pretty cool to have for following us. So I think that's reason enough to follow us. On Sundays, usually, we take a lot of your questions and we tell you that sharing is caring. So if you have questions, Stu and I actually try to tackle them. And I'm going to try and go through the game. Why don't I do this? Why don't I take your questions, and when we get Stu back, at that point, what we'll do is we'll talk about the game, and we'll talk about some of the hot topics that I had lined up for today. So back at Master Control, all right, newfound Habs. Habs defense 2024. Norlinder, Romanov, Mailloux, Harris, Barron, Gouli. Look, on paper, it looks that way. 2024, you'd have to think Edmondson's contract will expire. And, David Savard had a 4-year deal. So he's in year 2. So he'll probably stick around for a couple of years. You'd have to think it could be that. But keep in mind, there's the opportunity of signing unrestricted free agents, whether they will or they won't, I don't know. And there's also the possibility of trading one or two of these players to try and accelerate the rebuild, to try and get better a little bit quicker. Now, I would think that even though that looks logical on paper, it won't happen because you usually like to have older defensemen there to mentor some of the younger defensemen. I don't think the Canadiens defensemen are going to be all those young guys all at the same time in 2024. But, man, they're starting to have quite a bit of depth at the defense position. There's no doubt about it. Back to some more questions. Ryan Baker, listen to your show every day from Newfoundland. It's sick. Do you think Mailloux ever plays a game in a Canadian sweater? Look, it's an excellent question because, of course, there are some who are putting pressure on the Canadiens to actually repair a mistake that was made by drafting him, by letting him go. He's a prospect. He's a good one. He's big. He's strong. He packs a powerful shot. When he was drafted, somebody close to the Canadiens told me they thought he was going to be a poor man's Shea Weber. If that evaluation still exists within the Canadiens, it'll be a tough player to part ways with from a hockey point of view. From a non-hockey point of view, it'll be an easy thing to part ways with that kind of player. If I'd have to bet, I'll bet yes. Because I think even though a lot of people will say the Canadiens should let Logan Mailloux go, when you decide to commit to a player and there's a lot of work there to be done with that player, isn't it better to do the work with the player than to actually wash your hands and abandon the player. There's some work there that needs to be done with Logan Mailloux, and a nice opportunity for the Canadiens to be able to get to work with him and to help him. I've been told that Stu Cowan is back. Stu?
I'm back. Sorry about that, Tony.
Don't worry about it.
We got you. The technical difficulty, as they say.
Yeah, someone just asked me if I thought that Logan Mailloux would have a future with the Canadiens, and Stu, I don't know. I'm going to guess yes, but obviously I wouldn't be shocked if the management team parts ways with him, because a lot of people want the Canadiens to repair a mistake from the past.
Yeah, Kent Hughes was asked about it recently. I can't think, it might have been Arpin or Eric Engels. I don't remember which one. I had an interview with him, and he was saying that they're not going to sign him until they're convinced that he's never mind a good hockey player, but a good person. And I think from the Canadian standpoint, I think they'd like to wash their hands of this if they can. So I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if they won't sign him and just let him become a free agent, or if they'll sign him and try and trade him. I think it'd probably be the latter. But I think for the Canadiens and for Jeff, although Jeff Molson signed off on it when Marc Bergevin drafted Logan Mailloux, but I think there's other people involved in the Canadiens ownership group and advertisers, etc., that were really not happy with the decision that was made. And I think if I was a betting man, I would say that Logan Mailloux will probably be either allowed to become a free agent or will be dealt to another team, and he'll probably be dealt to another team.
All right, okay. Speaking of a young player, we're going to talk about Jordan Harris in a second here, who made his debut. The Canadiens, I was talking to you about that 2018 draft right before the technical difficulties happened, Stu, and the Canadiens drafted Kotkaniemi 3rd overall, and still a lot of people aren't happy with that pick, so I can get that. But after that, Alexander Romanov, Jesse Ylonen, and Jordan Harris, those are 3 pretty good picks, Stu.
No kidding. No kidding. Ylonen looked pretty good last night. It's Jordan Harris on his NHL debut. I still remember him from his first evaluation camp in 2018 after the Canadiens drafted him in Brossard. And I wrote a column about him at the time, and he was by far the best player on the ice back then. That's 4 years ago. And now after 4 years of playing at Northeastern, we see a pretty polished player. And he's a good sign for how I don't think there's any damage in guys staying the 4 years in university. In fact, I think it's a good thing. To mature physically, to mature mentally, to become more of a man. And the thing is with these university programs, they eat well, they sleep well, they work in the gym. They don't play as many games, but they develop physically and mentally, I think, better. And we're seeing that right now. 4 years of university, he stepped in last time. He didn't look out of place at all. And he said he wasn't nervous after the game, and he didn't look nervous on the ice. He can skate, he can move the puck, he's smart. He's the modern day defenseman. I remember 4 years ago at the evaluation camp writing, he's the defenseman now that NHL teams are looking for. The guy, he's not that big, 5'11", 185, but he can really move. And he's good defensively just by his positioning, good stick. And this kid, for a 3rd round pick, boy, he's looking pretty good.
Stu, let's take a look at the lineup last night for the Montreal Canadiens. And here we go. We have it up on screen if you're watching. Okay, Nick Suzuki in between Cole Caulfield on his left, as is custom over the last month or so, with Rem Pitlick on his right. We know that they started with Josh Anderson about a month ago. It worked out well for a couple of weeks. They were really hot. And then last game, they put Yoel Armia there. They didn't look too good. And then they run Rem Pitlick there last night. All right, Jake Evans with Anderson on his right, Hoffman on his left, Dvorak with Armia on his right and Byron on his left, and Paling with Pitlick on his right and Ylonen on his left. On defense, Romanov, Schuneman, Edmondson, Barron, Harris, Savard. And in goal, of course, Jake Allen. That was your lineup. Let's do a quick recap of what happened. Just over 3 minutes into the game, Jordan Harris joins the rush. Stu receives a pass from Rem Pitlick. The shot was stopped by Elliott. 9 minutes in, the shots are 7-2 for the Canadiens. There's a drop pass from Hedman to Kucherov with a pass to Stamkos, who basically pushes off of Justin Barron, gets that space that he needs, and is able to redirect it home and tap it home. 1-0 Tampa. Nick Paul takes off on the counterattack, a backhand pass to Anthony Cirelli. He's going to the net and crashes the net. Hoffman is trying to tie him up. It goes off his skate, 2-0 Tampa. The shots at the time were 10-4 for the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens didn't like it. They thought it was goalie interference. Brendan Gallagher, watching from wherever he was watching, he didn't like it either. because he tweeted some emojis of like, what's going on type of thing. Stu, did you think it was a goal?
I mean, I have no idea what goalie interference is anymore. I have no clue. I don't think most fans do, and I don't think players do, as Brendan Gallagher. I have no clue. The NHL has messed this up so much. We've gone from the ridiculous, toe in the crease, where if a player had its toe in the crease, it wasn't a goal, to what we saw last night, where a guy can run over the goalie, put the puck in the net, and it counts. I have no idea. The only thing I think the NHL should do, I think the NHL should get rid of video replay, because it's just become a joke. Just live with the calls on the ice. The referees are going to screw a couple up here and there. Live with it. I think the video replay only adds more confusion to everything. To me, if I was Gary Bettman, I'd just get rid of video replay, because I think it's an embarrassment to the NHL right now, because you have no idea. You watch videos of the exact same play. One play, it is goalie interference. Another time, it isn't. It seems to depend on who the team is, who the player is. It's just, to me, they're better off. Just go back. There's 2 referees on the ice. Let them make the call. They're going to screw up sometimes, but I think video review in the NHL has just become an embarrassment.
Without Gallagher saying anything, really, it almost sounded like he was saying if that would be him, it would have been called a no goal, and he's probably right about that. Stu?
Yep.
There's a save that we don't see all that often anymore because goalies are so technically sound. It's the save when you slide across and you stack your pads and you lift them both in the air, and usually it doesn't happen because, once again, they're so technically sound. But Elliott slides across and he stacks his pads. I think it's a pass that went from Armia to Dvorak, if memory serves me well. But what a great save from Elliott. And the first period comes to an end, and it's 2-0 for Tampa. This is crazy now. The Tampa Bay Lightning are on a 5-on-2. 5-on-2. And there's a drop pass that is not received. It goes back the other way for a 3-on-0 with 2 players ahead, Caulfield and Rem Pitlick. Caulfield to Pitlick, back to Caulfield, and he puts it upstairs. Stu, that shot, we've seen it so many times. We saw it again last night. By the way, he was Rookie of the Month for the month of March, and if he plays April the way he played March, he'll be the Rookie of the Month in the month of April as well. What a goal by Cole Caulfield.
He should shoot the puck every time he's in that situation, even if the goalie's expecting it. The way this kid shoots the puck, the Canadiens tweeted a photo last night. Great photo. You can see the puck buried under the bar in the back of the net after Caulfield shot it. And, what a shot. I mean, the kid's playing with so much confidence. The one pass back and then back to him again and then top of the net. But for that kid, boy, shoot the puck every time he has a chance. I remember I was talking with Steve Shutt earlier this season about Caulfield wearing Shutt's old number 22 and saying, what advice would you have for the kid? And Steve Shutt said, shoot the puck, kid. Just shoot the puck. Every time you get a chance to shoot it, shoot it. And with the shot he has, he should be doing that. And he is doing that more often now. We're seeing him, the release, the way he can pick corners. He was missing the net a lot earlier in the season. Yeah. Part of that is because he is trying to pick corners. I think when he was going through that period, he had to get a little less picky and maybe just make sure he got it on the net. But right now, he's picking corners, and more of them are going in than aren't. And that's 14 goals since Marty St. Louis took over as coach, which is remarkable. And even more remarkable is that he had 1 goal in 30 games with Dominic Ducharme. So it's just an incredible turnaround by this kid.
Yeah, Jordan Harris didn't look terrible on the ice. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a brain cramp. Welcome to the NHL, kid. He loses his helmet. He's sticking around, and he's playing. Mike Hoffman is telling him, get to the bench. You're not allowed playing without a helmet in the National Hockey League. He tries to get to the bench. He's called for a penalty. Tampa Bay goes on the power play. Killorn to Hedman to Kucherov. His blast makes it 3-1 Tampa. Nick Suzuki wins a huge offensive draw after that versus Anthony Cirelli. And then he goes to the net. A Corey Schoeneman shot makes its way through traffic. The Canadiens narrow the lead to 3-2. Stamkos, he turns the puck over. It goes to Mike Hoffman, who finds Josh Anderson, who goes in all alone on a breakaway. He goes 5-hole. The Canadiens tie it at 3. Before the second period is up, Stu, the Tampa Bay Lightning go back to the power play. Palat to point with a redirect. 4-3 is the score. In period number 3, Tyler Pitlick with a great play, agile play from his stick to his skate. It goes to Poehling, who finds Ylonen on the left side. His quick shot ties it at 4. There's no winner in overtime, where Jordan Harris was able to play in overtime 3-on-3. Isn't that cool? They go to a shootout. Point, Caulfield, Kucherov, Rem Pitlick, Steven Stamkos. That's a lot of talent. None of them scored. Nick Suzuki's your final shooter. He goes wide on the left, right-handed shot. He fake shot. He goes backhand up and over Elliott. The Canadiens win. They outshoot Tampa 15-11 in the first. They're outshot 18-9 in the second. Outshot 9-6 in the third. Outshot 3-1 in the overtime. Outshot 41-31 overall. In the faceoffs, 53% Montreal, 47% Tampa. Montreal 0 for 2 on the power play. Tampa 2 for 3. But where it really counts, once again, is on the scoreboard. Canadiens 5, Tampa Bay 4. They win in a shootout. Stu, once again, what an entertaining hockey game, man. It was fantastic.
And what a performance by Jake Allen again. He's been fantastic since he came back from that lower body injury. The goal by Suzuki, what a beauty. The way he faked the shot and the goalie bit on it totally, backhand. Nice goal. It's interesting you mentioned Jordan Harris with the helmet. It was Killorn who knocked his helmet off. And Killorn played university hockey at Harvard. And you wonder if maybe he figured, veteran move, maybe he figured the kid wouldn't know the rule, knocked the helmet off. And, NCAA, they play with the full cage and the chin thing, so their helmet's not going to come off. But it was sort of funny with Harris. Obviously, didn't know the rule, and but he said afterwards that the referee was really nice when he talked to him about it and said basically, "Kid, you lose your helmet, you got to go right to the bench." But rookie mistake. But I mean, that's the only real mistake that we saw the kid make in his NHL debut, and I'm sure the players were laughing about it with him on the flight back home and teasing him about it. So, but just as you said, this team, I remember. In the final days of Donald Ducharme behind the bench, I was counting how many. Oh my God, there's like 45 games left. We have to watch of this. Thinking, thank God I get paid to watch these guys. It was just horrible. And now they're entertaining every single night, and not just talking with my friends and family members, or they're looking forward to watching the games again. And as you said, they can't remember the last time they had this much fun watching a Canadiens team play.
Jordan Harris, 15 minutes, 55 seconds, was able to get on in the 3-on-3 overtime. Finished the night +1, 1 hit, 3 block shots. He had a shot on goal as well. So a real good start for him. It was a very impressive win, once again, dedicated to 2 people in particular. Number 1, the Canadiens' assistant equipment manager, Patrick Langlois, who was working his 25th, 100th game last night. And the players all gathered with him after the game to take a team picture. I thought that was awesome. And of course, number 2, to their coach, Marty St. Louis, who returned to Tampa, a place where he was a superstar as a player, and his number is retired there in Tampa. Stu, they won that one for the coach, and of course for Patrick Langlois.
Exactly, and you know what, Tony? We're talking about Jordan Harris and Barron and all these young guys. I mean, Fred Schoeneman's a rookie also, right? There's 3 rookies on defense last night. Yeah. And one of the biggest problems for the Canadiens in the past has been their player development. You can argue player development or drafting, or the combination of both. It's been horrible. And it's so refreshing now to see Marty St. Louis. I think one of the problems with the player development is that the Canadiens would crush the confidence of all their young players. They had all these young kids playing terrified to make a mistake, and knowing if they make a mistake, they're going to end up on the 4th line, or they're going to end up benched. I mean, Cole Caulfield being on the 4th line earlier this season. Now, these guys come up. Jordan Harris, first game in the NHL, you're starting in overtime. Barron, first game in the NHL, you're starting in overtime. Schoeneman last night on the top defense pairing with Romanov. And it was interesting, too, when one time the camera went to the bench and you had Savard talking with Jordan Harris, and just like a coach almost on that. So the player development aspect of this team just seems to be jumping ahead so quickly, just with Marty St. Louis, just the way that he has got these players to want to play the concepts that he wants to play. And as you mentioned, they go back to Tampa. You don't think the players were fired up to win a game for their coach?
Wow.
After what this coach has done for them and making hockey fun again, giving young guys a chance to play. He's been rotating guys in on that line with Suzuki and Caulfield. Pitlick there last night, trying to see who's going to fit moving forward for next season. Yeah. And it seems to be a competition for who's going to get that spot. And it's a real, from the first day Marty St. Louis took over at that first news conference in Brossard that I was at, it's just been such a breath of fresh air. Yeah. Also with Chantal Maccabi coming in and the new relationship with the media and the openness with the players and everything else. It's like this team it's incredible how quickly they've been able to, turn things around and just make it a fun team to watch and a fun team to be around again, because it hadn't been that way for a long time.
Joel Edmondson last night said after the game, he said, Marty St. Louis didn't want to make it about him, but we wanted to make it about him. That was a great quote that I thought was very, very telling. On player development, I'm going to agree with everything you just said. I'll start off by saying that, but I will add this, Stu. It's easier to do player development in what is a lost season.
Yes, without a doubt.
They don't have to make the playoffs, so the guys can play. And by the way, if they make mistakes and they end up losing, it's okay. As a matter of fact, they may even be a blessing in disguise. All right. It doesn't mean that the players still want to make mistakes or they don't want. Of course, they want to play their best. That's number one. Number two, the addition of Adam Nicholas, and it may be such a little thing, but before Justin Barron played a game with the Canadiens, they knew that he had to work on his skating backwards and his technique and his transfer of weight and all that stuff and his skating. And he's there and they work with him. And I've been in the business for 20 years and I've taken in my share of practices. And when I do, I find it mind-boggling that when the practice ends, like everyone just gets off the ice together at the same time and they're just off, right? And you don't see that in some other sports, and you won't even see that with some other teams. There's going to be guys that are going to stick around and they're going to work on their shooting. They're going to work on their stick handling. They're going to work on their skating. And if you can have, and it's usually the assistant coaches don't stick around. Now, if you can have a development coach and they do, and he sticks around, and I think that's awesome. We're going to give, you talked about Jake Allen and his performance last night. He has had more 40-plus he's the first goalie since Yaroslav Halak to have 7 40-plus save games. And going into last night's game, he had 5 consecutive 40-plus save games. And last night, he stopped 37 of 41. He had another fantastic game. Hey, we have an update on Carey Price because Dr. David Mulder was made available to the media. And this is what he had to say. He talked about Carey Price and he talked about Jonathan Drouin. In Drouin's case, he said that, they feel that he needs to have surgery on his wrist. Drouin would like to have a second opinion. Even if he does and he doesn't have surgery, his season is over, but they're fairly confident that he's going to need surgery. On Carey Price, quote, "We met with him initially with his injury, and he wanted to go to New York for surgery, which sometimes happens. Players are encouraged to have surgery in Montreal since it's easier to supervise. But he went to a very established group there. Then we followed his fitness very closely through a program done by our therapists. He has had to deal with several setbacks. A lot of goalies have to settle for a fairly short career, but I expect him to be back," he added. It's been very difficult for Price. Getting back into shape from his knee surgery has been so much longer than anyone anticipated. But he's progressing, and he's quite a warrior. He's working very hard to get back on top. His goal has always been to get there as soon as possible, and I hope he does. These quotes, by the way, we took them, I believe, from marqueur.com. On danescoulisses.com. The headline: Carey Price sera en mesure de disputer encore quelques saisons selon le Dr. Mulder. Dr. Mulder went on to add that in his opinion, Carey Price will be able to play several more years in the National Hockey League. Stu, what several is or a couple is, you'd have to think it's probably 2 or 3. He has 4 years left on his contract. But for those who are wondering whether or not he's going to play again, even though he hasn't been back on the ice yet and a setback can still happen, Dr. Mulder basically preparing everyone that Carey Price will still play again in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, and Mulder speaking is just another example of Chantal Machabie and the new openness or transparency this team has now as far as dealing with the media, because Mulder before would not have been allowed to speak to the media, I don't believe. But for right now, the best case scenario for the Canadiens, God forbid he would have, and he would have told us, yeah, I think he's still going to play. I mean, God forbid, yeah.
I mean, I've said it before, the Canadiens have been their own worst enemies for years when it comes to dealing with the media, but that's in the past, and things seem to be getting better now. But the best case scenario right now for the Canadiens and Carey Price is if he does come back healthy and can play, because I don't think he's tradable right now. Even if they're willing to eat half his contract, I don't see any other team who's going to want to pay $5 million with the Canadiens eating half for a 34-year-old goalie with knee issues and hip issues. And, after Stéphane Waite was fired, he talked about all the health issues that Price was going through. So the best case scenario right now for the Canadiens is if Carey Price can get healthy,
can come back next season. Him and Jake Allen in goal will cover up a lot of mistakes that the young kids are going to make. And I think that's the best case scenario right now for this team is if Carey Price can get healthy and come back and play here next season, because I don't think – what are the other options? I can't see them trading him. Buying him out is going to be cost a fortune moving forward. So to me, the best all-around scenario is Carey Price gets healthy and he comes back and he plays, and he can play 50 games with Jake Allen playing 32.
You ready for my shock statement on this Sunday?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come. It is the best case scenario for the Canadiens for Carey Price to come back and play 50 games to Jake Allen's 32. Because, like you said, Carey Price has no trade value right now. Even if the Canadiens take up half the salary, no one's going to want him.
And he also has a no movement clause, so he can veto any trade that he doesn't like.
Yeah, I think he'll welcome a move. Having said that, as much as it's the best case scenario for the Canadiens because Carey Price can try and build up some value because right now he has none. So building up a little bit, even if it's a little bit, is more than none. But if the Canadiens want to revamp and rebuild, Carey Price playing more of the games is actually a blessing. Because I find it hard to believe that he'd be a better goalie than Jake Allen right now. So they pick up less points. I mean, let's be honest. Jake Allen right now is playing the best hockey of his life.
But Tony, remember how good Carey Price was in the playoffs last year.
I also remember how bad he was in 3 of the past 4 regular seasons.
Well, exactly, and how inconsistent he's been. But then how much of that inconsistency had to do with him playing so many games? I think now Carey Price has never, ever wanted to give up his net, right? He's one of those guys who wanted to play 70 games a year. I think now, after everything he's gone through, I think he'd be happy if the Canadiens said, Carey, you're playing 50 games next year. I think he would welcome that at this point. I don't think in the past he would have. I don't think he ever wanted to give up his net. So I think now everything's gone through, the knee surgery and the player, the NHLPA player assistance program, everything else. At this point, if he was going to go into next season feeling healthy, prepared that he's going to play 50 games, they lay out a schedule before the season roughly of how it's going to work. I think he would welcome that at this point. I don't know if he would have previously.
If it's a fair fight next year, Jake Allen will be your number one.
We'll see. I mean, the thing with Jake Allen, Tony, I mean, we saw it last season. When he plays a lot of games, he starts to wear down. At the end of last season, he didn't look very good before they went into the playoffs, and then Carey came in. So I think it's as I said, it's a perfect situation for the Canadiens goaltending next season. If they go in with Carey, who can play 50 games, and Jake Allen can play 32 or somewhere around there, it'll help them both stay healthy. I think that the less games and more maintenance days or practice days. So right now, as I said, I think the news from Dr. Mulder, if you're a Canadiens fan, that's good news, because if he can come back and play next season, the Canadiens are a better team with Carey Price than without him.
To everyone watching on social media right now and everyone listening, of course, if you love this podcast, because I love to hear from people who love the podcast, right? I want you to comment sick. Now, obviously, if you're listening, grab your smartphone, go to one of the social media apps. But if you love the podcast, comment sick, because I end up actually counting how many sick comments we get, and it gives me an idea if you love one podcast more than another and how much you love it. If you really, really love it, comment sick, enter sick, enter sick, enter sick, enter, and just comment sick for the rest of the day. That'll be kind of cool. Hey, the Canadiens set a record. Did you know that? Let's bring it up. NHL top 5 teams, man games lost to injury and health protocols. Philadelphia, 467. Vancouver, 472. Arizona, 474. Buffalo, 504. The Montreal Canadiens, 656. What does that number tell you? Look at the next graphic here. It says, dans les coulisses, les joueurs du CH ont cumulé 656 matchs d'absence pour blessure cette saison, surpassant l'ancien record 629 des Kings en 2002-2003. The Canadiens have 656 man games lost due to injury this season, surpassing the Los Angeles Kings record of 629 back in 2002-2003. Stu, this team broke a record.
That's remarkable when you think of the injury. And there's still 20 games left. Carey Price is still on the list. Trey Weber is still on the list. That number, think of probably be close to 700, if not over that, by the time the season ends. They've just been jinxed all year. I mean, you look at Ben Sherratt before they traded him. He had an injury there for a while. And I remember at the time saying they better trade this guy quick because the injury jinx is incredible this year. Everybody's getting hurt. I mean, Suzuki's the only guy who's played every game. It's been really right from the beginning, starting with Weber and Price and Edmondson at training camp. And, Price was only supposed to be out a couple of weeks. Edmondson was only supposed to be out a couple of weeks. It's just been remarkable. The amount of injuries with this team has just been remarkable. And plus COVID coming in, it's a big reason. It's easy now for everybody to dump on Dominic Ducharme. It's a big reason why they struggled early in the season, and he didn't adjust to it well, sticking with the same system constantly. But you don't want to use injuries as an excuse. But when you have that many man games lost to injuries, it is a big part of why the Canadiens have been the worst team or one of the worst teams in the NHL this season.
Why don't we get to the questions, Stu? One each. The first one will be for you.
Okay.
TB, you think Jordan Harris will start the season with the Montreal Canadiens next year?
Yes.
Next. Josh Gerber, has Chris Weidman earned another NHL contract? And if not, with the Habs, who? Yes, he has with the Habs. I'm not sure. I don't think they're sure either. Stu, agree?
Yeah, I think he's done enough to show that he moves the puck well. He's good on the power play. He seems to be a really good teammate. He's come to the defense of some of his teammates, even though he's just a little guy. Really smart guy, a good guy, I think, to have in the locker room. When he was playing in the KHL, he spoke with us earlier this season. Every day in the KHL, he was thinking about how am I going to get back to the NHL. He was offered, I believe, $2 million to stay in the KHL. He took an NHL minimum contract to come back. So he definitely wants to stay in the NHL. And I think on a minimum contract, he's a guy that can be your 6th, 7th defenseman, use him on the power play. So I think he'll have a job somewhere else. I don't think it'll be with the Canadiens because I think they want to open up spots for so many of these young guys.
Funny story, when he at one point this year, he was skating at the outdoor rink and a couple of kids were there and they were playing a game of keep away and they're like, hey, you're pretty good. At what level do you play? I played for the Montreal Canadiens. That was pretty funny. All right, more questions. Stu, from Jeff Stahl, when the Habs play their next playoff game, their top D pair will be?
Ooh. I'm trying to think who shoots up. Maybe Romanov and Goulet. That's a good question because it's going to depend whether you don't want to put a veteran or Edmondson with. That's a tough question. I'm really not sure. What do you think, Tony?
Well, it depends when's the next time they're going to make the playoffs, right? If they're going to make it 3 years from now, well, then Savard's not going to be there and Edmondson's not going to be there. Yeah. Not that I think that Savard would be a first pairing either, but you'd have to think that either one of Romanov, Goulet. Not even Goulet. I would say one of Romanov or Harris will be on that first pairing. That's going to be my prediction.
Yeah, it'll depend, I think, maybe on Harris's defensive play. If he's going to be, he's not a big guy. If he's going to be good going up against the other team's top lines, or maybe he's better suited as a number 3 guy. But it's going to be interesting to see moving forward. It's a really,
but every pair usually has a yin and a yang. You know what I mean? Yeah. They usually have one guy who stay at home and one guy who's more of a puck mover. Next question. Good question now, and very good. Mm-hmm. Scott Friedman, who is the captain next year, Tony? I think if you have a vote, Suzuki is going to win the captaincy. If it was me, I'd make Edmondson the captain for 2 years, and once he's gone 2 years from now, then I'd make Suzuki the captain.
Yeah, I'm with you, Tony, because next year is the first year of that huge contract for Suzuki. And one of the good things when Suzuki was struggling earlier this season is that contract wasn't in yet.
Correct.
Imagine if you just, so it's a lot of pressure to put on, is he 21, 22 now, Suzuki, to put on a kid with the first year of that huge contract, plus the captaincy. I think there's no doubt Nick Suzuki is the future captain of this team. But to me, it would make a lot of sense to make Edmondson the captain. Yeah. 2 years left in his contract sort of meant that. And then at that point, I think Suzuki will definitely be ready to be the captain of the team. The
added responsibilities of having the C and being captain for Joel Edmondson and having to answer more questions are not going to affect this play
whatsoever.
Not at all. And he's an experienced player. He has a Stanley Cup ring. He has a presence in that locker room. Based on everything we've heard in the last several months, especially, to me, he's the de facto captain on the team.
Yeah, and Edmondson seems to enjoy dealing with the media. I mean, it's hard to tell because we haven't been in the room, but just in the Zooms and then in the press conference room and at the Bell Center and in Brossard and that. And he seems to be absolutely loved by his teammates. I mean, he's the guy who handles the music after the games. He's the guy, when he first came back, all the players were just talking about how he's one of those guys who brings all the players together. He tries to organize stuff to get guys together. So I think he'd be a perfect guy to come in. A little bit of a different personality, a lot different personality than Shea Weber. So for Suzuki to have been able to watch Shea Weber as a captain, who hated dealing with the media and very quiet sort of guy, and then have Edmondson, who's a much more open personality, and then 2 years from now be named captain and take a little bit of what he's learned from Weber, a little bit of what he has learned from Edmondson, a little bit of what he's seen from Brendan Gallagher. I think that'd be a pretty good background for him to be the next captain of the Canadiens, which I'm sure Nick Suzuki will be. It's just a matter of when.
And everything I've heard about Shea Weber, look, I know people who know him personally. I had Mike Ribeiro on the podcast several days ago. Mike Ribeiro, of course, was his former teammate. He and Shea Weber are very good friends. Everyone who I know that knows Shea Weber has nothing but great things, a gentleman and all that stuff. But I still have to say I'm disappointed that we haven't heard from Shea Weber this year. I mean, that's not going to change. I thought he should have been there on opening night. I thought he should have been around the team more often. I thought we should have heard on it from him on several occasions already. They've convinced Carey Price to talk. They even had Dr. Mulder to talk. They've had everyone to talk. You would think that they probably approached him to talk, and he has chosen not to talk, you would think. Anyway, I'm disappointed. I don't know what else to say other than that.
I'm disappointed, Tony, but from having been around Weber back when we were allowed in the locker room, I'm not surprised. He absolutely hated talking to the media. He didn't like doing it. He didn't want to do it. When he did it, he was very short answers. For whatever reason, I mean, I've heard the same thing, Tony. People who know him and people who, I remember when the Canadiens first got him, I called Adam Vignon, who was then with the Nashville Tennessee, and now he's at the Athletic, and he was the only beat guy really covering the Predators. And I said, "What's Shea Weber like?" And he said, "If you get talking to him about his fantasy football or anything like that, he's a great guy. But when you start, he won't talk about himself. He won't he doesn't like being in front of a camera. He doesn't like talking to the media that much. And as Adam said, he's the only beat guy covering the Predators.
Yeah.
So he said, if I didn't need to talk to Shea Weber for 2 weeks, he didn't talk to anybody in the media for 2 weeks. He came here, and you're right, though, being part of the captain, a big part of that in this market, Tony, or any major hockey market it's not talking to me, it's talking to the fans through the media.
Correct.
And fans, I'm sure, would love to hear from Shea Weber. I mean, what this guy did in the playoffs last season was heroic, playing through these injuries.
Yeah.
But it's as I said, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. And I am surprised the Canadiens have allowed him to not, like you said, I mean, Carey Price didn't want to speak either. And I think at some point, Chantal said, "Carey, you have to talk." And I guess they probably did have the same message to Weber, and he said, "I'm not talking anyway." So it's
look, I'm okay with athletes not being comfortable in front of a microphone, not wanting to talk to the media. Everyone's different, and there's some that aren't comfortable with it. I can understand that. That type of personality should not be your captain. But anyway, what's done is done.
And as part of the thing is, I've heard fans and that say, "Oh, why do they even talk to you guys? Why did the league mandates media rules?" Because they want players to talk to the media, because they want fans to read about the team. It's advertising for the league. That's why.
That's how you sell tickets.
That's why the media rules are in place. The players have to be available to the media.
Yeah.
The coach has to speak. It's the league wants it. I mean, the media. It's great for us in the media. We want it also because it allows us to write stories, talk on the radio, do podcasts. But the league is the ones who they want the players. They want the fans to know the players. And Chantal McAbee, when she came in her new job, says, "I want fans to fall in love with these players. I want them to get to know the players." There was a quote from Chantal the other week on Twitter. I saw how she's been telling Cole Caulfield to let his personality come out. Now when he's doing interviews, he says, "You're a good kid. You're a fun kid. You go up there and you say nothing." And he basically said, "Well, that's what they told me to do before. They didn't want me to say anything."
Yeah.
But they're selling their product, and a way they sell it is by making players available to the media, and they should allow players to show their personality. And to me, when Weber was named captain, it would have been better to me if they had made Gallagher captain, Weber an assistant. Weber could have been the true leader in the room, but Gallagher could have handled all the media stuff that he never wanted to do. And people have knocked Max Pacioretty as a captain, but I'll defend Max Pacioretty that every game, every practice, he was there to speak to the media. It didn't matter if he had 3 goals or he was -5. He was there to answer all the questions. And it's part of the job of being a captain, not only the Canadiens, but of any of the major hockey markets, any of the Canadian teams. And I can't imagine another NHL team having their captain not play the entire season and never once having him address the media.
Yeah, and like you said, Stu, by the way, for those who think it's about us, we don't care that they don't talk to us. Yep. We care if they don't talk to the fans. And the way they talk to the fans is talking through us. So that's the whole point. All right, back to the questions we go. On Brunchin with Marinaro. Pascal Thibault, is it a thing that you can't say you are done and be on LTIR, Stu?
It is, and that's, I mean, there were reports that the Canadiens had a trade with Weber in his contract with Arizona, and the NHL shot it down. The NHL maybe hasn't bought that Shea Weber can't play again. I mean, we haven't heard anything from him. We don't know what surgeries he's had or didn't have, and the NHL must be like, this guy played 25 minutes a game through an entire playoff run, and all of a sudden he can never play again. Like, I'm sure there's some people wondering what's going on, and then you look at his contract. He only makes $6 million over the final 4 years of that contract. Does Weber really want to play for that money? Or is he happy to just say, my knees, my ankle, all my injuries, I can't play, I physically can't play, sit at home, long-term injured reserve, collect his last $6 million bucks. The Canadiens, it doesn't hit them on the salary cap. But what happens in the offseason if the NHL rules or the Weber can't stay on long-term injured reserve?
Good question.
And that's, to me, at this point, I think that's a possibility. When you weigh all the factors, like, can he really not play it? He has 4 years left in his contract. So over the next 4 years, there's no chance of him recovering. We don't know because Weber hasn't said anything. We don't know. We're just going from what Dr. Mulder talked about Carey Price. So that weighs in heavily as far as, imagine if the Canadiens get Carey Price's $10.5 million salary cap hit next season and Shea Weber at 7.8 or whatever it is. So yes, I don't know. You can't just say I'm hurt, I can't play anymore, because then teams would, players that didn't have the front-loaded contracts and don't want to play the last 2 years for $1 million each say, I'm done, my knee hurts, I can't play anymore.
More questions. Marco Monaco. Stu, when you ask media questions to young players like Rem Pitlick, Paling, etc., who surprises you the most with their hockey IQ?
It's hard now because we don't get in the room, but Pitlick is a really smart guy. Really, really smart and thoughtful, answering questions. He's really impressed me the few times that he's been. I mean, I've never spoke to him one-on-one because we don't get into the locker room anymore, but just in the press room in Brossard or the press room at the Bell Center, he's a really smart guy, and he thinks the game a little differently. And I think that's one of the reasons Marty St. Louis likes him so much, and Pitlick likes St. Louis. I think Marty St. Louis looks at the game differently, and I think Rem Pitlick understands very well the way Marty St. Louis looks at the game. So I think they look at it in a similar way.
He played good with Caulfield and Suzuki last night.
He did. He's a really good hockey player. When you watch him, I mean, he's had him in the shootout. He's quick. He's not afraid to go to the dirty areas. A good passer. He can shoot. Yeah. I mean, what a pickup that was. And I think that was Jeff Gorton. I think that was before Kent Hughes took over as GM that they picked him up off of waivers. And boy, what a pickup.
Yeah, that was the best pickup ever since I was like 17 and I used to go to Super Neuf back in the... Anyway, that's another story for another day. You know who else is brilliant in terms of his IQ is Suzuki. Suzuki's absolutely brilliant. He's brilliant on the ice, and he's brilliant just the way he thinks the game and the way he's able to answer questions.
Well, and going back to that question about the media, I still remember Suzuki. I've interviewed Suzuki the first time he was ever at the Canadiens training camp and all the way through, and it's been fun to watch him progress on and off the ice. So the first few times I remember interviewing one-on-one, he was like a deer in the headlights. He was like a terrified, he didn't know, he was afraid he was going to say something wrong. You could tell. And from what Cole Caulfield said the other day about, I think that's because the Canadiens made him afraid. Like he was thinking, I can't say this, I can't, instead of just being himself. And it's come out more this season. He's got a bit of a sense of humor, and he's looking more and more confident when asking questions. And I think now, as I said, the Canadiens have been their own worst enemies for years when it comes to dealing with media. And now let these guys express themselves. Let themselves show the kind of people they are. And as Chantal said, they want fans to fall in love with these guys. And I think Nick Suzuki, when you get to know him a little bit better, I'm looking forward to hopefully we can get back into the dressing room next year. He seems like a kid that'd be a lot of fun to be around. And he seems like they put him out a lot to answer questions from the media. So he obviously doesn't mind doing it. Plus they're getting him ready, I'm sure, for when he's captain to do it. But yeah, a smart kid and been fun to watch him grow on and off the ice. Sharing is caring. Share this podcast with your friends, whether it's on Facebook or whatever social media app you use. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely for free. And if you love the podcast, just comment sick on all these social media
platforms. SICK, of course. Other questions? Let's go another 10 minutes or so. Matthew Jarvis, what have you liked with Romanov under Marty? What have you disliked? Disliked? Nothing. You'd like to see him pick up more points, but that's going to come with time. He's still fairly young in the National Hockey League. What have I liked? Marty St. Louis' willingness to give him top minutes, 24, 25, 26, 27. Use him on all situations. And if he makes a mistake, put him out there next shift again, and there you go. So, and you know what? Not only were the Canadiens young on the blue line last night, Stu, in the past week they were without Luke Richardson, who was out with COVID, of course. So our best to Luke, suffering from COVID, and we'll see you soon.
Well, you mentioned earlier, Tony, about how it's easy when you're in last place for player development.
Yes.
And it is. And this is a perfect example. I've said this last part of the season is like an early training camp for next season. And these are so valuable to Romanov to be playing these huge minutes. If he makes a mistake and it results in a goal, the Canes lose, it doesn't matter. It actually helps them when they go into the draft. So Marty St. Louis is using this final part of the season perfectly to get these guys groomed for next season.
Next question. LJ Lafleur, Tony and Stu, if St. Louis stays, do the assistants also come back? First of all, let's stop with this. If St. Louis stays, okay? St. Louis is staying, and he's going to sign a contract extension, and it's going to be for 3+ seasons, okay? And he fully deserves it because he's the best thing to happen. He's one of the best things to happen to this organization in a long, long time. I was going to say he's the best thing, but then again, if Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes don't happen, St. Louis doesn't happen either, all right? So he's one of the best things to happen to this organization. Stu, are all the assistants brought back? I'll say this. I'd like to tackle it before you do.
Okay.
I think he's grown very comfortable with Letowski. I think he's grown very, very comfortable with Luke Richardson, not to say that he hasn't grown comfortable with Burrows, but the power play needs help. And I wouldn't be surprised if Burrows was assigned a coaching responsibility, not on the bench, but to continue to work with the team and somebody to maybe take over that role. Now, do you think the same thing, or do you think actually someone takes over for Letowski's role?
I'd be surprised if Letowski and Richardson aren't back, because St. Louis has leaned on them both a lot, and they've helped them a lot getting used to working behind the bench. Him and Richardson were teammates before. Letowski, he spoke with the media recently, which is something that never would have happened before. Assistant coaches were never allowed to speak with the media. He did, and you can tell he's a smart guy. He works well with Marty St. Louis. He understands, I think, the way St. Louis sees the game. But I think you're right with Burrows. I could see him. Marty must have one guy that he's close to that he would maybe want to bring in, and maybe it is that guy who can help the power play, because the power play has really, really struggled. But with Burrows, nobody has more fun at practice than him. You see him on the ice. I keep thinking you should put full equipment on because he's out there in all the drills. So I could see him staying on in more of a player development type role, maybe going between Laval and the Canadiens and working with guys on specific things, younger players. He's a guy who made it to the NHL, not drafted, had a really successful career, was able to play with the Sedin brothers, so he gets it. Like, he knows how to be a role player. He knows how to be a top-line player. So I think he might be a guy that might be assigned a new role, and they bring somebody else in that St. Louis is close with, who has power play experience and can maybe help fix that, because they got to fix that.
All right, back to the questions we go. Here we go on Brunchin with Marinaro. Julian Giancola, do you think we're bringing in a big name free agent this summer? I hope not. Not. I'm a fan of the rebuild. I'm a fan of the revamp. The Canadiens are not close to being a Stanley Cup contender, even though they beat the 2-time Cup champs yesterday. They could use another second-line centerman. They could use another 1 or 2 scoring wingers. They could use a solid first pairing defenseman. I hope not. I hope they don't skip steps in their rebuild. And, I want this team to give themselves a shot at a Connor Bedard or Michkov next season.
I think they do, Tony, because I think they want to show these guys that we're trying to win. Like, we don't want to lose. And Ken Hughes has said this, like, we're not going to roll over and die and try and get the number 1 pick the next 2 years. We're trying to turn this thing around.
Wouldn't you want to try and win with Connor Bedard as your number 1 centerman?
Yeah, but there's no guarantee, Tony. Even if you finish last, there's like a 75% chance you don't get him. So if you're basing everything on a draft lottery, I think you're being foolish. I think and a lot of it depends on what we were talking about earlier with the Shea Weber contract situation. If that is settled and they can trade that contract during the summer, that's $7.8 million right there freed up. Plus there's other salaries going to be moving out. So if they have that money there, I think they're going to spend it. And you look at what happened back when Bergevin had his first come, first serve famous line to Radulov and Markov, and they both left, and then he had no plan B, and the Canadiens played like $8 million under the salary cap for 2 seasons, and we saw the results of that. So I think they are going to sign someone, but I think it sort of tied into what happens with the Shea Weber contract situation in the summer. If they have money, I don't think they're going to go right up to the cap, but I think if they have some extra money around, I think they will, just to send a sign to these young guys that, we know it's going to take a little while, but we're not willing to roll over and die, like Kent Hughes said, and be the worst team in the NHL for 2 or 3 years in a row.
We're going to go for 4 more minutes. So once we hit the hour mark, it'll be happy Sunday for everyone. All right, let's go. Couple more. Gabriel Kiss, what do you think about Ylonen? The kid isn't flashy, but doesn't hurt you and has a good shot. I think he skates well. I think he shoots well. And I think he's given himself a real good opportunity to be on this team next season. Stu?
Yeah, he looks like an NHL player. He doesn't look out of place out there at all. And with a third liner or wherever it is, but I think he definitely has a future with this team. He looks like a good hockey player.
Next, Sammy Maslum. Is Marty St. Louis now convinced that Josh Anderson should stay with Caulfield and Suzuki? No, I don't think he's convinced that he should stay with Caulfield and Suzuki. I think Rem Pitlick did well there yesterday. And I think all Marty St. Louis is looking for, first and foremost, before having a line, is looking for duos. And then after that, he's looking for a balance. He's looking to put together a balanced team that gives his team a chance to win hockey games.
Not only is Marty St. Louis not convinced Josh Anderson fits on that line, I'm wondering if Kent Hughes is not convinced if he wants to bring Josh Anderson, keep him here. I mean, I'm just speculating, but maybe, he's been inconsistent. The rest of what's left in that contract, is that a guy they might shop in the offseason?
That's his problem. If he'd be a consistent hockey player, he'd be on the first line, no questions asked.
Exactly, but he's not consistent, and there's a long term left in that contract. And it's been the Canes were looking for that power forward for years and years and years and years. They finally found one, so I don't think they're just going to throw one away. But I mean, that job, it seemed like a perfect fit for Anderson, right, with those guys, and that inconsistency weighed in, and now St. Louis is playing around and maybe let a little bit of fire under Anderson too. Like, we're not handing this to you. If you want to play with these guys, you got to earn it.
Other questions coming in. MC, do you think Marty St. Louis wrote some numbers on the board before the game? Do you think he put $1 or $2 down on the board before the game? Interestingly enough, I had Mitch Garber on when the Canadiens played the Seattle Kraken, of course, who's a minority owner of the Kraken. And I asked him if he was going to put some dollars on the board before the game, and he said no. And I said no, and he said no. I just, based on what happened in the National Football League and with the Miami Dolphins and stuff like that, and I don't like that. So even though it's usually not more than a few $1,000s, and even though it usually goes towards the team's rookie party or the team's year-end party, where they basically just will be able to use that money off the tab. Mitch Garber wasn't in on it, and Marty St. Louis, I don't know. Have you heard anything?
I don't think he would, because I think you're crossing a line when it's a coach doing that.
Yeah.
As opposed to a player. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about Joel Edmondson or Nick Suzuki.
Yeah.
Or maybe even Cole Caulfield. Maybe one of those guys did.
Yeah.
Maybe one of those guys put some money up on the board for the coach. So I'd be surprised if the coach did it, but I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Joel Edmondson said, look, boys, here's my money on the board. This is for the coach.
Even if a coach would ever do it, I don't think you'd ever find out.
No.
One of those things that I think is probably just better off not said, maybe a little bit even frowned upon.
Or maybe the coach gives the money to the player and says, here, put this up on the board because I don't want them to know it was me.
Hey, Cole, I want to win the game. Could you put some money on the board? Well, Marty, I don't have that much money.
But we're talking about like Joel Edmondson. He seems like the kind of guy that would do something. Like, I could see Joel Edmondson doing that. Like, putting up whatever. I could see Joel Edmondson doing something like that.
I like Edmondson a lot. Yeah. For me, he is the epitome of character, veteran, leadership. I mean, I like him a lot. I mean, wow. All right, okay. 1 minute left. Why don't we take 2 more questions? This is the second last one. Alan Rutman, your choice, trade Evans or Paling. I would, if I had to trade one of the two, I would trade Paling first. But that's, the thing I worry about is how long Jake Evans is going to play in the National Hockey League. I have not seen another player. I don't know if there's another player in the National Hockey League that I saw suffer 4 concussions in 2 years and 9 months and probably suffer, some injuries that I thought were going to be concussions after that. But I worry about Evans long-term, but, he's a better player than Ryan Paling.
Yeah, and he's been a better player with Marty St. Louis. I think he's surprised me with how the offensive ability he has at the NHL level. And I think he's maybe even surprised himself. And he spoke about this a little bit recently, Evans did, saying that, he used to look at it if I played a game and the other team didn't score against me and we shut them down. That was a good game. And now Marty St. Louis wants more out of him. We don't just want you to shut them down. We want you to score when you get a chance too. And he's scored some nice goals this season. He's got good vision, but Tony, he's one of those guys who seems to put himself in vulnerable positions a lot. And I worry about him too moving forward because I'd hate to see him get carried off the ice a third time on a stretcher from a concussion.
Last one, Stu, on this Sunday, April 3rd, and it comes courtesy of Matthew Jarvis. Whose corner are you in? Will Smith or Chris Rock? Ha, ha, ha. Joking. This podcast is sick. You might be joking, but I'm going to tackle it anyway. Violence is never an answer. So I think what he did was wrong.
Yeah.
Really, really wrong.
It was so ridiculous. I thought it was staged. I was convinced it was staged right from the beginning because it just didn't make any sense. And he laughed at the joke when Rock, and that's part of being a famous person. People joke and make jokes, and he could have discussed it with him afterwards and explained the situation with his wife, and don't do that again. But it was Will Smith is. I think it'd be interesting to see what kind of a price he pays for it. I mean, Chris Rock's a comedian. That's what comedians do.
So Stu,
not good.
If I ever make a bald joke about you, or you ever make a fat joke about me,
hey.
We can't touch each other.
My hockey buddies 1 year for my birthday bought me a hairbrush, but it was just the handle with no brush. So I didn't slap anybody.
No, we're not for violence. We're all for love, and we bring it to you. Peace, joy, and love here at 6 a.m. in Hawaii. Sick. Tyler Wentz is watching from Hawaii. Tyler, thanks so much for doing that. Corey
Aloha.
Loves the Sick podcast. It's sick. Thank you, Corey. Hey, he's in Hawaii at 6 a.m. Thanks for watching the podcast. In about 5 or 6 hours from now, you can actually go to the beach and take in the sun. And 5 or 6 hours from now, I'll stay locked in my house here in Montreal because it's still cold. Until the next time, Stu, thanks again.
Hey, my pleasure, Tony.
The podcast will be back with another edition tomorrow. Tell your friends about it. This podcast, like me, is sick.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by 8.6, Intense by Nature.